Welcome to Ready Set Exec, the podcast where we sit down with executives across North America to unpack their business, leadership, and expertise.
And every other week, join us for Market Watch, all things hiring, real insights and no fluff. All right, I'm joined today with Nicholaus Bond. He's a LMFT and a seasoned clinical leader in behavioral healthcare with a strong focus on organizational growth and business development. He has overseen operations across multiple Southern California locations, guiding teams of clinicians and staff and ensuring the integration of high quality, accessible care. His approach blends clinical depth with strategic leadership. He's known for expanding access to care through program design and scaling, and has led initiatives that align clinical outcomes with sustainable growth. So hello, Nicholaus. It's nice to chat again.
Hey, thanks, John, for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. So I think we were in the preamble, they were talking a little bit about, COVID forced everybody, to work remotely, including clinics and people that needed care. And obviously with the COVID, people went absolutely bonkers. So business was good, I assume. But like now that we're going back to the office and so on, how has things changed that you see in the practice?
Yeah. The irony of that whole experience for me is that I was in the middle of a job change right around the time that COVID was ramping up. And I went to a program that was residential and detox. So I worked with, and then a transitional living program in person at Benchmark Transitions. So while everyone else learned how to do COVID remote work in that era, 2020, 2022, I was in person on the floor every day. And so it wasn't until I had a subsequent job change in 2022, where I am now at New Youth Therapy Center and Family Services, where I had to learn it. And so I feel like I was behind in the learning curve, but undoubtedly, I think it changed the industry in ways that probably won't ever ratchet back completely. And I think there's good and bad to that, and we could get into that. But I think it's shifted forever in a lot of ways because of it.
Well, I mean, once you get a taste of remote working, like you don't want to go back to the office. I know you have kids and family, like it's really hard to balance everything. For myself, I have 3 kids of my own. I know you have 5, and between the two, it's like, how do you manage that, right? It's like you want to be there for pickups and drop offs. You got to be in office, but then the California traffic. I mean, in LA is something else, right?
Well, there's an interesting personal dynamic there, because the in-person work allowed me, or excuse me, the virtual work allowed me to participate in my family in ways that I hadn't been able to before. I definitely pick up, drop off, middle of the day breaks where I could go, run an errand or something for my family. But then my natural disposition is that I really love being in and around the work itself in person. And so I felt like my energy kind of decreased over time in a lot of ways virtually, with respect to my investment and how I felt about my work. And our owner at New U and I have talked a lot about this, about how we've shifted that organization where we was doing a ton of virtual work. When I joined, we really worked hard and shifted back to an in-person presence. And that's been great, I think, for the clinical work and the office and the culture of the company. But for me, I kind of miss the office and the energy and the buzz. And if there's a problem, I can go knock on your door and we can talk about it. We don't have to make a virtual meeting. But then the benefit of balance and family, you lose that. So for me personally, it's been an interesting mix of both positive and negative to be a largely virtual position. I do go into the office about once a week, but it's definitely been a mixed bag for sure.
How is the quality care, would you say? Like, if you had to choose for clients, like, do you promote more in person or virtual? Like, does it matter? You think the quality is the same, whether it's, on a video or not?
Completely different, depending on which client you're looking at. I think there are some clients that the nature of what brings them to the room, as far as for therapy goes, allows for the work to be just as beneficial in this setting virtually. And they do great with it, and the outcomes are good, and the client is satisfied, and they basically save 2 hours of drive time. Get ready, drive to the office, have your therapy session, grab a Starbucks on the way back, put yourself together again. And it was a 3-hour adventure, but they could do it virtually. And then they just carved a single hour out of their day, got the same benefit, and then they gained 2+ hours back in their life. That person does great with virtual. And I think, and that's the part that I think is really beneficial and should stay. There are the other folks, prime example is like young kids, your kind of 5 to 12 crowd. Stick them in front of a computer. I think we all observed that, those of us who had kids in COVID when they were trying to learn from home. You only get so much benefit. And the longer you do therapy through that modality, there's like a diminishing return as far as how long you can do therapy and still get the same benefit. So it's completely different for the client. I think it's really good to have the options both ways, but I could never say carte blanche, it's better this way or that way, because every client has different needs.
Yeah, and I can imagine if it's like hypnotherapy or any kind of ketamine treatment, you don't want to be doing that. You can't do that virtually. And same with play therapy for kids, they got to be in
Oh,
person.
you know what? It gotta be, I don't know, but is there a difference? Absolutely. I remember there have been a number of times where we've had parents who really, really needed it for the convenience to be virtual. And then we would have a clinician attempt to work with that child and then would come back and essentially say, listen, like, you're not going to get what you're hoping you get out of this therapy experience. It's not going to provide you with the benefit that you're hoping for your child. You really should come in or go somewhere else where you can come in. But again, there's been some people who've done it, and there's a lot of really creative therapists out there who have all these virtual play therapy things they do, and because of their creativity have made it work. So I would never say, hey, nope, can't work for anybody ever and we should stop it, but I will definitely say it is not for everyone. And once you know it's not for you, or the clinician, once you know it's not for your client, on an ethical basis, you really ought to say that and say, hey, I think you need something different in person.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Individual case by case basis, I guess. And, I know for a while I was teaching virtually. So a good example is during the pandemic, I was teaching at a college marketing courses, and there was no rule for them to have their video camera on, so
Yeah,
you'd be
rough.
talking to the abyss, right? And so if they're not engaged on their side, you have no idea if you're getting through. And if you're trying to do therapy, I can imagine over virtual, like the physical presence maybe for certain people is comforting, that they have someone in front of them and it's a little more intimate than maybe a virtual thing. So yeah, I totally can understand that.
Well, and that's got to shift your teaching approach completely. I mean, how do you even teach to that when you're just talking to black? Like, how do you teach that?
I found the biggest thing was you become an entertainer as much as an educator,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you have to call people out, because if you're just asking for responses, you're going to get the same 3 people that are keeners that are always
Right.
responding. Meanwhile, 37 other people are just, they're scrolling their Instagram, or they're distracted
Hmm.
because they're on their laptops and they have you in the background, but they're on Amazon shopping, on Sheen buying stuff. Like it's crazy, which I'm kind of happy about. The new school ban of no cell phones in schools are talking about. They're starting to do
Yeah.
that. In Quebec, they did it. I think in some states they're trying
Hmm.
to implement it. Like, I'm all for that, because these young minds, they just can't handle the stimulus you know of the constant flashing screen. Like it's a lot, right?
We so in my kids' school, my middle school, no phones. And it's great. I think they've seen improvement. Teachers feel like, oh, there are the kids, there are their faces again. They're not constantly like ducking down and sneaking peeks under the desk. And we could get into social media for kids as far as mental health. I don't think there's any person out there who could argue a healthy mental benefit from teenagers on social media. It's
Do you
it's it's
have
pretty, and
like,
frankly, adults.
is that something that actually, I was always wondering about who's coming for therapy? Like, are there clients that have come in for like social media addiction, internet addiction, the AI? Now there's like a looming AI dread, right? Of AI
Yeah.
coming in, taking all our jobs. Like, do people have come asking for help on those kind of issues? Because it's like the new technochronic issues we're getting, right? That are kind of,
Yeah.
can
how
you
you
deal with that?
see it how you see it is that the parents of teenagers, right? Parents will list it as like a feature of the problem that they see their kid having, is that that they're recluse, and that they're depressed, and that they're always looking at their phone, and they're struggling in school. And so you just see it as part of the dust cloud, so to speak, of all the different things that are happening in the life of the child, in the case of kids. And then in my experience, adults are a lot less likely to list it as a problem for themselves. But if you get to talking about, their interactions, or their engagement with social media, their phone, whatever. You'll hear, especially among the folks who are especially anxious or especially depressed, like, oh yeah, it's a problem. I'm on there a lot. FOMO, you're looking at, what else is doing and you feel like you're missing out on everything. It's definitely a big feature of folks who have, I think, since the pandemic especially, been increasingly more anxious, increasingly more depressed. Absolutely.
We see it everywhere. It's become a major problem. And I don't think we haven't really as a society figured out how to deal with all this technology.
I have in my house, you just unplug it. You just take it away.
Good luck. Good
Well,
luck.
I know. I was talking to a friend, he's a dad of a boy on my son's flag football team, and he was talking about his kid and YouTube and how he's always watching dumb stuff, and then he's repeating dumb stuff, and I don't know what to do about it. And my response to him is like, dude, do what I do. No YouTube. It's just block.
I guess the issue that I've heard is, like, for example, with social media is if the kids, let's say they're in high school. I know my daughter is going into grade 9 right now, and all of her friends are on Snapchat. So she's not on there. You take her off, you're kind of isolating her from her friends because she can't socialize. Now, I don't want her to be on there, but it's a hard rub because as a parent, you're like, I want them to socialize. I want them to be part of the collective friend group, but I don't like the channel they're using because it's toxic. Why can't they just pick up the phone like we used to do?
I know it's hard. It's hard because I see what you're saying, and I definitely have had conversations with parents who are, having the same struggle. For me personally, people can live their lives however they want to live it. I would way rather have my child not have to deal with the negatives that come, because we know it's largely negative, of being on and connected to social media, than deal with the social outcomes. And frankly, I see more and more parents doing that. A lot of the parents of my kids' friends are in the same boat. They're making the same choices. And so that helps too, because I think there's a more awareness on the part of parents who've realized, like, there's nothing good for this for my kid. Like, you can't have it.
Yeah, it's crazy because I remember I didn't want to give my young twins an iPad as they were growing up, but at the school they're giving them a Chromebook in kindergarten. I was like, what is going on here?
I was just talking to my kindergartner. I have a kindergartner.
Yeah,
And he was talking about being on the computer. I'm like, what?
yeah.
Blocks? Those
It's part
tiny
of their
shoes? Like,
curriculum now. Like
I
they just
know.
give them a tablet. They let them. I'm like,
Yes.
wow, yeah. So
I know.
'cause we
I
got
know.
a lot of things we got to fix, but
We could go down that rabbit hole forever. For
yeah.
Sure.
So where do you think, like, in terms of like clinical health, like the virtual practices, like, better health being better me or better health? I keep getting mixed up, but the big online platforms and things like that. Like,
Sure.
how do you where do you see the industry going for mental health? We obviously need more of it. We need to invest in it. We need more practitioners, right? Like, but
I think there are a lot of really talented clinicians who work for digital companies. I'll say that. I know some. I've got friends and colleagues who work for those digital platforms. Are talented, skillful clinicians. I think it's also a place for clinicians who are not so adept to kind of hide, because there's not a ton of vetting in some instances in some platforms. I won't get into who I think is good or not good at it. So if you figure you've got a digital platform, they hardly vet their clinicians. You don't know if they're really good or not, but then that clinician's in that network and they're constantly being fed clients who are just logging on and clicking who they want. It becomes a place for people to hide out who maybe aren't as skillful. And so that's a downfall. I think that's a major downfall for sure. But again, access to care, if you think about people who didn't used to have access and now they do, that's an upswing. So again, I would never necessarily come down on the side, at least at this point, that it's good or it's bad. But there are problems with it that I think are hard to solve if the organizations don't tackle them. And you see some companies who really leaned into digital health. My current company, New Youth Therapy Center Family Services, leans very hard into the digital option. We really promote it if people want it, need it as a service. But we're owned and operated by clinicians. And so we know how to vet clinicians. A company may be owned and operated by non-clinical folks who don't employ really talented clinical teams. Do they have the initiative and or do they do the work to vet their clinicians? I don't know. Probably some do it more than others.
yeah, quality control. Anything that's you're trying to scale, if you're trying to get hundreds and hundreds of people, you're going to get a couple of bad apples, and it's you got to have systems in place, right? Totally makes sense.
Volume and quality always fight against each other. You're always fighting. Whenever you're doing scale and volume, you're dragging quality along with you. And so if you don't really pay attention to it, you're going to potentially see bad outcomes.
So when you're scaling new locations, for example, I mean, you're hiring up and whatnot. What's sort of the strategy you normally use for like vetting and shadowing? Like, do they shadow with someone, or how do you go about that in the clinical practice? Like, let's say you're hiring 5 new therapists, right? How do you check them out besides referrals and background
Yeah,
checks?
it depends on the clinical model, So, for example, if you're employing associates, and you automatically or you should, when you employ associates, you're employing someone who and the public should know is a learner. This is a person who's learning this trade and this practice. So, what I look for more so than anything is openness. Is this a person who's open, and we can really teach and train and mold into a really skillful clinician? Because you're not necessarily going to look for expertise, because as an associate, you better hope that someone doesn't think they're already an expert as an associate, because they've cut themselves off real early from being a lifelong learner if they've done that. So I'm looking for openness, and this is a person who's teachable. They like my style, I like their style, and I can help them through the learning process. With licensed staff, people who are already established clinicians who should be relatively independent. I really look for people who are very humble, kind of the same quality of openness, but also have a desire to explain their willingness to still learn and their willingness to open up and broaden their practice, because you've never arrived. You've never figured it all out. If you work as you're vetting people and there's a lot of ego, I tend to not be into drama. And so if I see a ton of ego, I tend to stay away from that. That's never really panned out well, especially in these digital platforms.
Totally makes sense. Usually the ones that are talking the most about themselves or not, they're trying to hide something, or they're insecure maybe, and got to over embellish their skill set.
Well, and if I see that, if you take a topic and you do the first level of questioning or exploration on a given topic, and a person feels comfortable there, but then all of a sudden you get 2 or 3 layers deep in the nuances or complexities of a topic, and you find that they just are using a lot of filler words and a lot of platitudes, a lot of generalities. You really quickly begin to flesh out whether or not a person has any level of expertise. And so you kind of almost take people into deep waters. If you're looking for expertise, you got to go into deep waters and really get into the nuances and let that person talk it out. You'll find out real quickly, if you let a person have space to just talk out their perspective, it'll reveal their competence pretty quick. If you do too much talking, you're never going to see that.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. For these, we always talk about how we're going more to virtual, but there's also like AI therapists now that they're trying to
Yeah.
push, right? And on one hand, it's got the body of all human knowledge in their back pocket,
Uh-huh.
okay? And so they can correlate different problems and see patterns and behaviors and whatnot. But on the other hand, the humanity aspect and all that, like, do you see AI being as a competitor, or is it sort of like maybe for low end things, or a cheaper way of doing therapy for people who can't afford it? Like, what would it be good for?
I don't know. We'll see. I was listening to a podcast this week, the Sean Ryan podcast, and he had a gentleman on there who has a YouTube channel, and he revealed in the podcast that he had uploaded something like 20 years of different types of correspondence to train an AI engine on himself. And yeah, like all this correspondence. And then he asks the AI and trains it as if it's a therapist to, analyze me, teach me about me, tell me about me. And then now he interacts with this entity or this bot, whatever the heck it is, in a almost clinical fashion. And I didn't finish the whole podcast, and I can't even remember how the topic went, but I worry about that a little bit. This almost is going to wax spiritual, but I think that there's a real healing benefit in the human connection.
Yeah.
And I worry that if doing that with an artificial entity, you get all of the insight, because AI can be incredibly insightful, but it's hollow. Like it's
Yeah.
devoid of life.
Well, also like
So there's that movie Ex Machina.
I guess the recommendations, and I can say this from like maybe personal experience with therapy in the past, is like, if you trust your therapist, then you more likely maybe take what they say to heart. If it's a robot telling you something, you'd be like, yeah, whatever, okay. Maybe I don't know, maybe that's the connection of the human connection with the person you're trusting with these intimate thoughts, right?
Well, I've known a dear friend who struggles with his mental health and was engaging constantly with an AI of some kind. I can't remember what platform. It did bad work on him. I'll tell you that. I don't know if he was trying to make it into a therapist or what he was doing, but basically his family reported to me as we were talking about what's going on with my friend. Hey, this is what he's doing. He's talking to this AI all the time, constantly, and he's disposed to bipolar, some psychotic features, I think, based on how I've known him over the past decade. And that was a really unhealthy thing for him. So I wonder,
Maybe as a tool though, like I think, for
maybe.
being able to say, hey, Nicholas is your therapist. Before Nicholas will start with you, his AI helper is going to scan all your emails and correspondence and notes and
Yeah,
social media to get a profile to give him insights into you. That may be a good way of onboarding people, that I can
maybe.
see that being very helpful. Like, oh, I looked at the last correspondence with you and your past relationships and everything it's confidential, of course, but our bot has found out these things. And that's a good way to sort of kick off maybe a lot of the therapy because there's a lot of line for people, you track their, just their
Well,
day to
there's a
day.
lot of work. There's a lot of work being done in the AI space around assisting with clinical documentation and quality assurance. And I've experimented with a number of those platforms where you'll have an engagement with someone such as this, and then the AI is listening, and then it'll do a session note, and it'll produce a session note. Every once in a while, I've found that it extends itself into prognosis and, hey, this is what I think is happening. Is this a major depressive disorder? Or this is a generalized anxiety? Maybe the therapist had not previously identified that as an issue. So I'm not quite convinced whether or not it's the AI being better at identifying a diagnosable issue, or it's overextending itself and doing too much, or maybe it's a deficiency on the part of the therapist. I think that's all to be seen. But as a tool, I definitely think there's space for AI to be implemented into this line of work for the good. I don't know quite what it's going to be yet. It's so early for that.
Yeah, I guess the worry too, people just talking AI bots. I've heard there's AI companions, even AI girlfriends now.
Oh yeah, I read an article about that the other day.
Like
Oh man.
the last thing we need to do as humans is further isolate ourselves from society. I learned that during COVID, the isolation was terrible. And then it took me a couple of years after COVID to sort of get that feeling of back to normal. Like, okay, now I can, I remember going the first time to the grocery store when they said masks could be coming off and
Uh-huh.
people were still wearing their masks. And I'm like, am I the weirdo here? And I felt really weird, but apparently the masks were allowed to take them off now. It was a couple of years there. It was just kind of fuzzy. It felt fuzzy, like things were off socially. So that's all isolation, right? Like that's not good.
I think so. I think so, and I think we've seen it depicted in literature. Seen it depicted in entertainment, movies. The more and more and more you sacrifice freedom to industry or to artificial intelligence, it never bodes well. Think about the Matrix. Think about Terminator. Think about like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. We've seen that this doesn't go.
Hey, you can't
The
tell
Giver.
that they haven't warned us, right? They've done a good job of warning us of the dangers, but we're
Yeah,
we're full speed ahead. Doesn't matter.
yeah.
You have AI, general
What's
intelligence
the
soon,
what's
and
the Tom what's the
what could
Tom
go
Cruise
wrong?
movie where yeah, what's the Tom Cruise movie where they can predict the crimes that'll happen in the
Minority
future?
Report, yeah.
Minority Report. Dude, no, we don't want that. I don't think we want that.
AI has predicted that you're gonna create a crime, so you're going to jail, but
Yeah, no, we don't. There's a famous quote, people who sacrifice freedom for security deserve neither or something like that. I think that's wise to think about.
it's just funny that there's these people from hundreds of years ago that predicted a lot of this stuff or thought about it, as
Totally.
philosophers, right? And we're
Yeah.
seeing it now play out in front of us, and yet we're so enamored by this new technology marvel that we're not putting the brakes on it, right? It seems now we're in a full arms race to general intelligence. So, I'm like, hey, I've seen the movies. We'll see what happens, but it's pretty terrifying the capabilities and things they're worried about. So we'll all have
As far
to
as it
see.
As far as it goes with the industry, I think so long as the human, with human intuition, again, I kind of think of it as a spiritual enterprise, uses the AI as a tool and not to think, or to do the actual work, so to speak, I think then it remains helpful, but it should be a tool. Just like anything we use, we are the masters of the tool and you become skillful with the application of the tool. But once you start letting the tool do the work and then you're just an accoutrement to the tool, I don't know, man.
Well,
He's
here's sort of
driving.
an aside I was thinking about is, they say that, Western societies become more secular, like less religious. And I
Hmm.
think we can see
Yep.
that with the generations, right? Like I know at my church, there's less young people going than the elderly, let's say, right? The newer
Hmm.
generations are just not attending as much. Do you think there's a correlation between our level of faith and maybe mental health? Do you think that's something we could say, yeah, there is, the less faith someone has, there's a more propensity for, you don't have something as a foundation, let's say, to ground you maybe? I'm not sure if
Well,
that's something.
I think, yeah, no, I think it's a hard question, because I don't want to come down on the side that I'm out here to, convert anyone to one kind of thinking. But I will say this: if you're devoid of a structure of like an overarching system whereby you organize the world in the way that you perceive the world, then you're kind of stuck in chaos because the world itself is very chaotic, and in religious systems, spiritual systems, even I'm a proponent of the writings of the Stoics. If you look at the writings of Marcus Aurelius and other Stoics who are his contemporaries, they give you a method whereby you can organize the world around you, and that's very helpful psychologically. For a person who's a spiritual or religious person, I'm a man of faith, and my family and I, we go to church on Sundays, and you know teach religious principles in our home, Christian principles, and that helps you organize the world and the things that happen. If a person has no organizing approach to how they experience the world, especially children, I think it's very detrimental to your mental health. Beyond that, I believe it's also a truth that, there's a divine creator, and we are children of that divine creator, and are meant to come close to and like that creator. But those are my spiritual and religious beliefs. And I don't think, I'm not out here to evangelize, at least on this platform. But if you have none of that, if you have no organizing principle, whereby you figure out how to ingest the world, and it's just haphazard, especially for children, but adults too, I don't think you're going to see good outcomes.
Well, I find everybody likes, some level of structure or at least
Yeah.
foundational beliefs, and across many religions, it's very similar in terms of the basics, right? Like don't steal, don't kill, that kind of thing. So I would say they're almost universal truths that we all kind of agree to, right? And so as long as you have like some kind of base, I think it helps you in your day to day making decisions. Like you got to have sort of a guiding light for yourself in how you conduct yourself, right? Like I know for me, part of how I conduct myself with people day to day, I follow like the golden rule, in the terms of, you know, try and treat people fairly and ethically and with integrity and so on. That's helped me out huge, not only in my personal life, but in business too, because you build that level of trust with people. If you can't build trust, you
Hmm.
can't have clients, you can't, have a good family life and so on, right? So I could agree that, it's important to have some principles. You don't have, it doesn't have to be maybe religious based, but you got to have for yourself something that grounds you to, as you said, the total chaos that's the internet and social
Yeah.
media and all these things that are flying at us that are, it's all distractions, but it seems like there's just so much of it now. Like you cannot escape no matter where you go, you cannot
Yeah.
escape this level of, well, just like a Minority Report, the guy's walking through the mall and he's getting ads that are holographic ads popping up in his face, right?
Yeah.
So we're at
Well,
almost
I
at that
think
level
I
now.
think the dating apps, you kind of metaphorically swipe right, swipe left, your religious or your spiritual or your philosophical principles as guiding principles, swipe right, swipe left. This is wholly beneficial for me. This is wholly not beneficial for me. Very few things are in the middle. Very few things are ultimately neutral, because even things that are maybe neutral, it's ultimately an opportunity cost, because if you're selecting something that's potentially neutral, that means you're also not selecting something that's beneficial. So even though it's not necessarily a direct negative, it is an opportunity cost because you didn't do the better thing. So for me, I think, spiritual religious principles, I try to do my best. I'm not great always at living up to even my own faith. I think it's important to keep it there. And then people, like, as you say, kind of to your original question, if you're devoid of that, does it promote mental illness? Yeah, in a way, unless you have some other organizing principle that you follow. I think it does open the door for that.
That totally makes sense. And I think, you see where people are putting their time, right? So if you have these people that are being isolated, they're putting their
Mhm.
time in certain, let's say, activities that they can be doing. And as you said, the opportunity cost, right? Like you're putting your time in this, you're taking time away from doing something else that's more productive or constructive for you. It's same with our vices, right? Like I know some people that have addictive personalities, they've chosen
Mhm.
to be addicted to the gym because they view
Yeah.
that's a healthy addiction. Of course, you're also releasing all those endorphins as you would maybe with taking drugs, but at least you're doing it in a more constructive environment. So the opportunity cost, you said, hey, like I'm not going to go down that path. I'm going to put my addiction to more, let's say, productive things that'll net
Mhm.
benefit. And so I've seen a lot of people make that transition either from they have an addictive personality, so they try to steer it towards something that's healthy. So
I mean, any person clinically who I've ever worked with, or personally who I've worked with, who's struggled with addiction, you almost always find when they come out on the other end of an addiction, if they've found some level of healing from it, they reinvest all that energy somewhere else. Rarely have I ever seen someone who was at one point struggling with addiction and then you don't see them pushing hard in some part of their life. Like you have to redirect all that energy, that kind of compulsive or obsessive energy that's prevalent in any addictive personality. If you don't redirect that somewhere else, you often just find yourself right back where you started. So I don't think you're wrong. I think you see probably what most of us see.
yeah, it's like just making better choices, I guess. But the better choices compound over time, right? If you keep making better
Yeah. Oh,
choices,
yeah.
it
It's so
helps.
simple. It's so simple, but so hard. It's so simple, but so
Easier
hard
said
to
than
make
done.
them
I mean, yeah, it's like, oh,
easier
just make
said than
better
done.
choices. That's your therapy
Right.
session for today. Here's your invoice.
But you know what? I mean, what's funny about you saying that, I've done clinical work with people. When a person comes to mind who I've done clinical work, and it always seems to wrap around to the answer is simple here, and he would often be the one to say it, like, I know what I need to do. I know what I need to do. I know what I need to do. And yet, even knowing what he needed to do, for some reason always fell back into the same hole that he found himself in the first place. Not always, and he's gotten better. I think a lot of ways,
Well, it
probably.
seems like with a lot of these things, it's like those first steps, the first initial, like just like going to the gym, the first month is brutal until you get into the routine. And then by month 6, you're like, hey, I'm rolling. I'm seeing the results and I'm feeling better. And it all sort of keeps building up. So I think for many people, it's that initial, like getting things going, right? So I
Yeah,
know how to see that.
starting's tough. I think you're right. Starting's tough for a lot of people.
Makes sense. And so, just to circle back to maybe like healthcare and whatnot, like where do you see the next 5 years for the industry? Like, where do you see high growth? Do you see troubles hiring? Where do you see?
I think within the next 5 years, we'll probably see where a lot of these with respect to mental health, right? We're going to see whether or not these digital platforms are here to stay, or whether or not they fizzle out and leave the industry. That, in large part, I think will be driven by whether or not they're able to remain profitable, and whether or not people will still find quality in those services. So between those two markers, they're profitable enterprises. You wouldn't be in the business if you're not making money on the part of the business owner or operator. And then the public has to still find the service valuable. So I think we'll see that over the next couple of years, probably hopefully 5 years from now. We know the answer, whether or not these industries are here to stay. And then as far as hiring, the more these digital platforms succeed or don't, I think organizations that are more mom and pop, local clinics, people who are in their communities are going to find it harder and harder and harder to retain clinicians and to hire good clinicians. Because if the digital marketplace remains to be as attractive as it is to some, and you can still get paid well, potentially better than what you get at the community clinic, why would you ever go into the office? For some, again, for me, I really enjoy the office in a lot of ways, even though I enjoy the benefits of digital work. But yeah, So I think as that question gets answered, the hiring becomes harder because retention is harder. If the digital platforms can continue to be successful in the way they monetize and profit from the work they do, but then, we're watching the quality. And the public will tell us that. That's the free economy for you. People will tell us whether or not they like the service, because if they don't like the service, they'll quit purchasing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like with anything, there's a disruption to the industry, and you have to sort of let it play out and see. Maybe
Yeah.
there's always going to be, I think, a need for in person, regardless. Some people just
Yeah.
and need
Yeah.
it. I guess, like with anything, only the strong survive, right? In terms of business, right? So it's going to be
Well,
pretty.
and I know clinicians who have trained virtually, worked virtually, and ever only done virtual services. They've literally never done an in-person service. And I've been there when they did their first in-person sessions, and I've heard them describe the difference. This one young woman who is an associate with us at my current company described that to me and talked about the visceral feeling being different. Like there's an energy in the room, even in this conversation. Not that it's bad. It's not bad at all. But if we were sitting here together in comfy chairs in the same room, you'd feel my energy, I'd feel your energy. There's something different about it. And you feel that when you're in person. And some people have literally never trained to do that. Some consumers have literally never experienced it. So to some degree, you also don't know what you're missing if you've never had it the other way.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that, and um, it's always going to be a bit of an issue of convenience versus
Yeah.
connection, and can
Yep.
how it's going to play out. So I mean, I think there's a place for both, as we said, right? It's just
Yeah. I think so.
preference. I mean, not only that, but for many people that are working now 2-3 jobs, like good luck finding time to do anything. They're going to take their therapy sessions during work hours, like on their lunch break or
Yeah.
something, right?
Yeah,
'Cause
absolutely. Well, as I said, if you think about it, it's a 3-hour adventure to go to therapy in person. If you're in a city, you're gonna get ready, get in the car, drive where you're gonna go, be in traffic, do the thing, check in, check out,
yeah.
drive home. It's a
At the
3-hour
same
thing.
time, though, it's almost like a ritual kind of thing, right? And on the way home for that 1 hour drive, it gives you actually some time to like reflect. So I can see
Can be good.
the benefits of that too. As much as I hate driving in traffic, the stop and go is like, forget about it. I drive standard, so like stop and go
Uh-huh.
traffic is just like the most frustrating thing for me. I'd rather drive around the whole city than be caught in
Uh-huh.
the constant
Yeah.
downshifting and whatnot. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's something for sure. Well, I think we're pretty good on time here. I
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
to thank you for coming on our. This is our pilot episode.
Okay. Hey, lucky me.
Podcast, not a podcast. We're gonna figure out a name and have this up pretty shortly. But really appreciate you coming on, and it's been great chatting with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, we'll keep in touch.
All right. Okay,
Thanks.
take care.